Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Customer Confidence Series, where we've been exploring the ideas, data, and infrastructure behind fostering customer trust in digital billing and payment systems. Quickly up top, a little bit of housekeeping. This session will be recorded and sent out to everyone who registered for today's live stream. We do have InvoiceCloud team members here on the line fielding questions today. So if anything comes up, pop up your thoughts in the chat box, and they'll get back to you as soon as possible. And by the way, if they don't have the answer right away, they may ask you for your email to follow up after the fact. That's totally normal. Today, we're going to talk about possibly the biggest influence on customer trust, and that's security. For customers to confidently use your digital payment systems, you need to establish a secure foundation for them to rely upon. And that's what episode 3 is all about. So let's get into it. Before we get too far down the line, I'm Brandon Williams. I run cybersecurity here at InvoiceCloud. I've been in the industry for about 30 years in various roles. I'm a pretty technical person, so I built technology from the ground up, as well as secured companies using global teams, much like this one. For those of you who are new to InvoiceCloud, welcome. InvoiceCloud provides a fully cloud-based digital billing and payment platform. We primarily serve utilities, insurance carriers, local government, and county tax organizations. We were founded in 2009, so we've been doing this for about 17 years now. And our value prop is built around 3 things: driving digital adoption, elevating customer satisfaction, and simplifying transactions. To make this a reality for the billing organizations that partner with us, we use behavioral and operational insights to go beyond simply processing payments. Instead, we intelligently engage your customers with personalized reminders and easy-to-use self-service options so your teams can stop chasing payments and focus on priority projects. And as you'll hear throughout this session, none of these results are possible without a trustworthy foundation that service providers and their customers can count on. If you caught episode 2 of this series, you heard from Joe Sawyer some compelling data about what consumers expect from a digital bill payment experience. One of the big takeaways is that people expect an Amazon-like experience even for paying bills. Simple, fast, modern, and reliable. Today, we're going to expand on the question episode 2 left on the table, which is Amazon doesn't just have a great checkout experience. They have world-class access controls protecting every account, every transaction, and every piece of customer data behind the scenes. So what does that look like for billing organizations like yours? That's what we're answering today. So in this session, we're going to cover how security concerns affect customer trust in digital payment usage, what advanced identity security is, and what's at stake when identity and access aren't properly managed, what sends a signal to a payer that the platform they're using is secure, and how all of this connects to operational efficiency, brand reputation, and customer satisfaction. And finally, we'll arm you with what you should be asking vendors to evaluate their security and compliance posture. So we're going to start with the why, because before we get into any specific technology, it's important that we all agree on one thing. Security isn't just an IT checkbox. It's a direct driver of whether your customers trust you enough to pay you online. And trust, as you'll see in the data we're about to share, is the single biggest lever you have when it comes to getting payers to adopt digital payment options. So in the research we did, we asked 1,000 American consumers, what is the single most important factor that makes you trust a digital bill payment platform? And the answer wasn't a slick interface or a great mobile app. It came down to security, and specifically whether the platform looked and felt secure. 55% of consumers said they would abandon an online payment experience if they don't immediately trust the interface. And of all the factors that influence the sense of trust, a sense of security was the #1 thing that payers look for. 82% said they're more likely to use a platform that highlights its security and compliance measures. This tells us something important. Trust is as much a perception as it is a technical reality. Your customers are making real-time judgments about whether it's safe to enter their payment information, and those judgments happen in seconds. If your payment experience doesn't signal security visibly, that's a call to your call center, a delayed bill, potentially a delinquency, and it was entirely preventable. So now that we understand why security and perception are so critical to adoption, let's talk about what it looks like in practice. And today I want to focus on advanced identity security, or the modern authentication layer that sits at the front door of your online payment portal. Advanced identity security is essentially the login and authentication experience your payers and staff interact with every time they access your portal. Advanced identity layers can be built directly into a billing and payment platform, which means you don't need to go out and source a separate identity platform to get enterprise-grade protection. At its core, advanced identity security includes 3 things: support for enterprise authentication standards like built-in multi-factor authentication, or MFA, and single sign-on, or SSO. Let's talk about what MFA and SSO are, because they're not just IT concepts. They're the features that keep your systems secure and your staff workflows efficient. Multi-factor authentication, or MFA, is something that most of us already have experienced personally. It's that extra step where after you enter your password, you're asked to confirm your identity in a second way. For service providers, it means that every member of your organization must complete a second layer of identity verification to access the back end of your payment platform. The reason that it matters so much is that even if a password is compromised, a second factor stops unauthorized access cold. And it significantly reduces account takeover risk, which means you have better control over who can access your system, ensuring your payers' financial data stays protected. Choose MFA when you don't have a centralized identity provider or you want to strengthen security quickly without integration complexity. For example, InvoiceCloud users can manage authentication directly within our platform. Your standard options for how you can deploy MFA usually include SMS-based one-time passwords, SMS OTP. Those are delivered via text message. And then you have email OTP, which is the same thing, but just sent to the user's email. And then you have the Authenticator app, which is time-based one-time passcodes. Those are generated by something like Google Authenticator. That's an open source algorithm though, so there are password managers that also do the same thing. Some things to keep in mind when considering the best deployment for your staff. The Authenticator app does require user enrollment. There is a pairing mechanism that occurs when that user logs in to enable it. You've probably seen it before if you've used it, but that's a step that has to be completed by the user. If you don't want to do that and you want to use SMS, you have to make sure you have valid mobile numbers. And then probably the biggest thing to remember is that MFA applies consistently across all portal users when enabled. So your IT manager can't get an MFA via SMS if your customer service team gets them from an email OTP. Single sign-on, or SSO, lets employees access multiple applications and systems with one set of credentials. One login, everything they need. So for your staff, this means less password fatigue, fewer help desk tickets for forgotten credentials, and a smoother day-to-day experience. For enterprise organizations especially, SSO is often a policy requirement. So choose SSO when you already have an enterprise identity provider, Okta, Entra ID, Ping Identity, and so on. And you want your billing portal access to align with how you manage authentication across the rest of your application stack. SSO is the right answer when centralized lifecycle management, consistent policy enforcement, and audit defensibility are priorities. One practical challenge with SSO is user management. Specifically, what happens when a new employee needs access? Do you have to create them in every system manually? With just-in-time or JIT provisioning, the answer is no. When JIT is enabled, your payment platform automatically creates a user count the first time someone successfully logs in via SSO, so there's no pre-creation required. And a default role can be assigned based on your configuration, and you're off to the races. If JIT is not enabled, users do need to exist in a system before they can authenticate, which is the right call for some environments where tighter access control is preferred. The bottom line, JIT reduces ongoing user administration, which is a real time saver in environments with frequent staff turnover. Many organizations assume that getting enterprise-grade identity security means going out and procuring a separate identity platform, something like Okta, Ping, or a standalone MFA solution, and then trying to integrate that with their billing and payment system. With systems like InvoiceCloud, you don't have to do that. Everything we just walked through, MFA, SSO, JIT provisioning, it's all built into the platform. That means you can meet your security and compliance requirements without adding vendor complexity, additional licensing costs, or integration headaches. It works on its own, or it works alongside the identity infrastructure you already have. The flexibility is intentional because we know you shouldn't have to choose between strong security and operational simplicity. We've talked about what security looks like under the hood. Now let's talk about what security looks like to your payers, because these are two different conversations and both matter. Visible security signals are what drive consumer confidence at the moment of payment. So let's look at a few important ones. There's a few foundational signals your payers are looking for, often without even realizing it. The first is SSL, or modernly TLS encryption. That's the HTTPS / thing in the URL and the padlock icon in the browser bar. It tells your customer that the data is encrypted in transit. This is table stakes, but it's something that payers actively notice and they've been trained to respond to. High-grade encryption. With high-grade encryption, Sensitive payment data is never displayed or retrievable after submission, so customers can pay with complete confidence. And then digital wallets. Options like Apple Pay and Google Wallet use device level security and are increasingly familiar and trusted by consumers. Payments without the need to key in a card number isn't just convenient, it signals security as well. And these features don't just protect your customers, they reassure your customers. And reassured customers complete payments. Compliance often gets framed as a burden, like something you have to do, but let's reframe it. Compliance is also a customer benefit. When your payment platform is PCI DSS compliant and when it meets accessibility standards, when it checks the boxes your regulators require, that's not just protecting your organization, that's making your platform safer and easier to use for every single one of your payers. Accessibility in particular is worth calling out. If you want a deep dive on this, I highly suggest watching Matt Radle's session on how to ensure your payment platform is accessible. Someone on the team should be putting that link in the chat for your convenience right now. Essentially, 1 in 3 Americans have an accessibility need that makes it difficult for them to use online billing and payment systems, and 65% of consumers avoid inaccessible online payment experiences. 82% of people are somewhat or much more likely to use online payments if they're accessible to all. So make sure that your payments provider meets WCAG level A and AA at a minimum. Not only do accessibility and compliance measures protect your organization, they also make it easier for a wider group of customers to make payments digitally. Okay, so you have the security infrastructure, you have the compliance certifications. Now what? One of the most common missed opportunities we see is billers who have done tremendous work on the security side of their platform, but they haven't built the customer-facing communications to go with it. So have materials ready, frequently asked questions, help center content, email communications, and even some simple on-screen messaging that explains to your payers what you're doing to protect them. At InvoiceCloud, we have a dedicated marketing team for our customers. That team helps them by creating materials like these to communicate important messages, like how to self-serve or how we ensure their financial information is secure. It also doesn't hurt to regularly share best practices with your customer base, like ways to keep their passwords secure. Not only does it serve to keep everyone safer, it further solidifies to your customers that your organization is security minded and has their best interest at heart. This kind of proactive communication does 2 things. It demonstrates your commitment to security, and it gives your customers confidence that you're a partner they can trust. And that trust directly translates to adoption. We've covered the data on why security matters, what advanced identity security looks like in practice, and how to signal a sense of safety to your customers. Now let's talk about what all this gets you, the business outcomes. When your payers trust your platform, they will use it. And when they use it consistently, the downstream benefits compound. Accelerated digital adoption means empowered, confident users become repeat users. Every payer who successfully completes a digital payment and feels good about it is more likely to do it again next month. That's how you build sustainable adoption, not just one-time conversions. This will also result in lower call volumes. Every payment completed online is a call that doesn't come to your contact center. At scale, this is significant. We're talking about real staff time freed up for higher value work. It also means fewer delinquencies. When it's easy and reassuring to pay online, people pay on time. Trusted, frictionless digital payment experiences reduce the instances where a customer simply gives up and forgets to try again, which again leads to cost and time savings as well. Less manual processing and fewer paper checks to handle means that you've saved time and you've reduced print and postage costs. Plus, you get paid faster. Compare a real-time payment to receiving a check in the mail. Besides the mail lag, it takes a couple days for the checks to clear, sometimes a week. The more digital payments you have, the healthier your cash flow. Beyond the operational wins, there's a brand story here too. If the payment experience looks and feels secure, you become that biller that makes paying easy and safe. It just happens automatically, and they put it out of their minds. And a customer who knows that their payment will automatically process is a highly satisfied customer. So fewer customers that are frustrated means fewer calls to your team, better consumer ratings like with JD Power, or even healthier retention for folks in industries like insurance. And then finally, a better staff experience. And this one often gets overlooked. When digital adoption goes up, your staff spends less time processing manual payments and fielding calls about billing confusion. That's a better day-to-day for your team, which feeds back into better customer service overall. Security and trust aren't soft benefits, they're hard outcomes on your books, on your CSAT scores, and on your team's quality of life. So before we wrap up, I want to arm you with something concrete, the right questions to ask when you're evaluating a billing and payment vendor's security posture. Because not all platforms are created equal, and the stakes are high enough that you deserve clear and verifiable answers. One of the first things to ask for is a trust center. A trust center is a public-facing page where a vendor documents their security posture, compliance certifications, and they display audit artifacts and more. It's the difference between a vendor saying we take security seriously and a vendor showing you that they do, with audited evidence, third-party certifications, and real-time updates. If a billing and payment vendor doesn't have a publicly accessible trust center, that's a signal worth paying attention to. Transparency is a feature. So here's a practical checklist you can take into any vendor evaluation conversation. On the identity and authentication side, ask about MFA. Is it native, built in, or do you need a third-party tool? Ask about single sign-on. Is it standards-based, supporting SAML and OIDC? Those are the enterprise standards you need for compatibility with your existing identity infrastructure. Then you have deterministic identity matching. Can they match users definitively via SSO-ID to prevent duplicate accounts or identity confusion? Just-in-time provisioning, is user creation automated on the first login? And are there any additional identity platforms required? Like, can they deliver all of this without adding vendor complexity to your stack? On the compliance and transparency side, ask about a trust center. Is it public? Is it up to date? Ask about data center security. Where is data stored? How is it protected, physically and logically? And then PCI, what level of PCI DSS compliance do they hold? And can they share documentation? From an accessibility perspective, are they WCAG compliant? Do they meet ADA requirements? And these aren't gotcha questions, they're just standard expectations for a vendor handling sensitive financial data on your behalf. A great vendor will welcome them. We put these reminders and more questions you should ask vendors into a checklist. So everyone who's registered for this session will receive it after we wrap today. So before we do wrap, let's quickly summarize what we reviewed today. Security is a critical influencer of customer trust and therefore digital adoption. Increased adoption means lower call volumes and fewer delinquencies and a better experience for customers and staff. Look for billing and payment solutions with an advanced identity security layer that can work on its own or with your tech stack. And then ask vendors for a trust center. Check their compliance and accessibility standards and see if they'll help educate your customers. And that wraps up our content for today. So thank you so much for spending this time with us. Remember, security isn't just a feature. It's the foundation that makes everything else possible. Digital adoption, operational efficiency, customer satisfaction, and trust that lasts. We'd love to continue the conversation. I'm sure the InvoiceCloud team on the line has been fielding any questions that have come up in the chat. If you're just now thinking of a question, reach out to us directly at webinarquestions@invoicecloud.com. We'll make sure that you get a response, and we're happy to set up time to go deeper on any of this with your team. And also keep an eye out for episode 4 of the Customer Confidence webinar series. Our director of product, Bill Hughes, is going to be talking about the importance of consistent, recognizable branding for payments reminders and other customer communications. Thanks again for your time and have a great day.